friggin' Wolverine!
AppStateCentral.com weekly podcast. All right, and good evening, and welcome to the fifth installment of the AppStateCentral.com weekly podcast. As always, a big thank you to the Marching Mountaineers and the Appalachian Sports Network for providing those sound clips you just heard in the intro. This is Bryden, along with me is my co-host Mike. As you guys probably all know, the Mountaineers are coming off a huge non-conference win at home against Montana, and it was a very well-played game by both sides, and it came down to the very final seconds with Demetrius McCray intercepting a last heave by the Grizzlies. But even though that was a huge win for us, we really can't get caught up in the victory because the Citadel is coming to Kid Brewer Stadium this weekend, and they're coming off a big win of their own, taking down number 3 Georgia Southern. So this week we will go ahead and talk about all the positives and areas of improvement that we saw from the Montana game, as well as preview the matchup with the Citadel. But first, Mike, let's go ahead and give our listeners a reminder on how to reach us on the social media front.
Yes, definitely. As always, if you want to interact with us during the show, you can send us a tweet at AppStateCentral or post on our Facebook wall at facebook.com/AppStateCentral. We always love to hear from anyone who visits the site or listens to the podcast, whether you're listening to it live or you're catching it after the fact. Please get in touch with us. Let us know what you think. And before we really get into tonight's show, Brian and I both would like to, obviously acknowledge the significance of this date. Marking 11 years since the, September 11th, 2001. And just as a small token of our appreciation for all the men and women who serve our country, and also to honor those who lost their lives on that day, just want to have a brief moment of silence.
All right, thank you guys for joining in on that brief moment of silence. As Mike said, it's a small token of what we can do. We truly do appreciate everything that everybody who has or is serving our country, and honor those that would lost their lives protecting others and in a tragic event. So to take away from the little somber note, let's change gears and start talking about football again. And as I mentioned before, we're going to start by reviewing all the positive things that came out of the huge win this weekend against the Grizzlies, and then also kind of touch on some of the things that are a little concerning to us as we move forward in conference play. As you guys all know, our team is relatively young, so there's still room for improvement all around the board, basically. But first, Mike, let's go ahead and talk about what did you like in this game?
Offensively, I think, as anybody who watched the game can tell you, it started and ended with Jamal Jackson. He really put on an amazing performance on Saturday. He was 24-34 with 260 yards, 2 touchdowns, and most importantly, 0 interceptions. We did not turn the ball over at all, and a lot of that has to be credited to Jamal. He also had 65 rushing yards and 1 touchdown, and it was very, very impressive performance. I liked how he really just seemed to have control of the offense the entire game. He earned himself Southern Conference Offensive Player of the Week award for his performance, and his mate there in the backfield, Stephen Miller. I thought he had a really, really gutsy performance as well. It's always tough when you lose a guy that was projected to kind of carry the load like Appalachia did when Rod Chisholm went down against East Carolina. And Stephen Miller is a guy that, he's not the biggest guy. He's 5'8", 180 pounds. He's not what you think of as a every down bruising kind of running back. And he was asked to do a lot, and he really stepped up and did a great job. He ended with 91 rushing yards, 2 touchdowns. But to me, the most important thing that he did the whole game was how strong that he ran at the end when it really counted. The final touchdown drive, he really looked great. He got the last 29 yards on the ground, just marching right into the end zone. I think he really kind of put an exclamation point on it with the 15-yard run where he really laid some wood on Bo Tully, who was a really good safety for Montana, a guy he was giving up about 20 pounds to. It was a very physical run, and it's, obviously we were, anybody that watched the games, really understood and saw that Appalachian was struggling all day to run the ball in between the tackles. It seemed that every time they tried to do it, the Grizz would have a guy or two in the backfield and be able to stop it for a short loss or no gain. And It really showed a lot of toughness, a lot of persistence, and that last drive there really seemed to wear down the Montana defensive front. He took advantage. He hit the holes hard. He was a really that really I think gave a great boost of energy to the whole team. And as great as it is that Jamal put on such a strong performance, and we had such great numbers through the air. It's nice to see us make a physical statement and get some big yards on the ground when it really counted. He came through for us when it really mattered. And then aside from him, Sean Price in his first career start was great. It didn't take long for him. Very similar to anybody that was at the Fan Fest scrimmage. It didn't take long for him to make his presence felt. He had a 32-yard touchdown on the first drive of the game. Had several other receptions throughout. He ended up with 8 receptions for 103 yards. Had a couple of short receptions. He also had another big 32-yard gain to get a first down on the first touchdown drive of the fourth quarter. And that one big play that was immediately following a big defensive stand, and that play really got that first touchdown drive going. Got Appalachian that 28-27 lead, a lead that obviously they would never surrender after that. I was also very impressed with Malachi Jones in the receiving corps as well. Most significantly, a 17-yard reception on 3rd and 16 to keep the final touchdown drive alive before Stephen Miller was able to kind of do his thing and get it into the end zone. He kept that alive. He showed not only just great hands and great speed, but great field awareness. He knew exactly where the sticks were, and he set up 1 yard behind the sticks and caught it. And it was a huge reception that really kept the momentum in our corner after Dan Moore had just kind of broken our backs with a huge play that ended up going for a Grizz touchdown. The receiving corps in general was very impressive. Malachi Jones going from being the starter in week 1 to playing a little more of a complimentary role in week 2, made the adjustment seamlessly. He looked great. Andrew Peacock had a big catch and run that got us our first touchdown in the second half. The receiving, this is as talented and deep as a receiving corps as I can remember Appalachian having, and they really just continue to impress. And lastly, the offensive line. We as I mentioned, they did struggle early. But they wore down the Montana defensive line late. They opened some nice holes on the final drive. Jamal Jackson, threw the ball 34 times, was only sacked once, and that's as big and physical a defensive front we're gonna see all year. So it's still a work in progress. They're still young, but I saw some nice progress, and I thought the offensive line did a good job.
Yeah, definitely. You basically hit everything that I thought was the best part of the game. Obviously, Jamal Jackson, you can't not like what he did. And before I get any further, I want to apologize to all our listeners. My voice is still a little hoarse from this weekend, so if I start clearing my throat or my voice cracks, I apologize. But yeah, Jamal Jackson, you can't not like what he did. It was just. You already told the stats. It was great numbers, but the most important thing was no turnovers. I was actually, I don't know if I will every week or not, but I was actually sitting right behind his mother, and it was really fun watching her and just how involved in the game she is, and it was really neat to see. And then Stephen Miller. What I liked about him is he seemed to get stronger as the game went on. He didn't put up great numbers by any means. Less than 100 yards, a little more than 3 yards per carry. But he did get the 2 touchdowns, and he was very strong on the final drive. So he didn't put up great numbers, but he put up the numbers when we needed them. He put us on his back on that final drive, and the last 4 plays were carries for him, obviously finalizing in the end zone. And then our wide receiving corps, they are just so young but so talented, and a lot of that has to do with Jamal as well. He's spreading the ball. He's making it virtually impossible for a defense to narrow down on a receiver. You're coming into the season, you're thinking Tony Washington and Andrew Peacock are going to be our stars, and they've put up good numbers thus far. But by all means, so far, in my opinion at least, our best receivers have been Sean Price and Malachi Jones. Obviously, Sean Price was only last week, and I think a large reason for that is because the defenses are keying in on Peacock and Washington. since they are the veterans. But then we have these two freshmen stepping up, and I think that's absolutely huge. And a lot of that is also our offensive line is giving Jamal time. I mean, they're allowing him to find the open receiver and allowing him to spread the ball open. So I feel like I basically just copied exactly what Mike said, but that really that's exactly what it was. Is a combination of all of those, Jamal Jackson, Stephen Miller, and the receiving core, highlighted by Sean Price, Malachi Jones, and then obviously, like Mike said, Andrew Peacock had that great catch and run to score the touchdown in the fourth quarter, which was huge. And that brought the momentum back to us, I thought. So again, I really don't want to reiterate any more than what Mike's already said. So I guess let's go on to the defense. What did you like about the defense, Mike?
Well, there was there was a lot to like on defense. Obviously, things to work on as well. But one thing, just in general, that always really makes me happy is when it's a big game like this. It's one that's been hyped up. Two of the premier programs in the FCS. A really, really big game for our fans at home, and I love when there's a big game and your big guys step up and do what you expect them to do. When your stars come to play in the big game, that's always very encouraging, and that certainly happened for us on defense. Brandon Greer, I think, has to get the game ball on defense. He was incredible. 13 tackles, 3 tackles for loss, 2 sacks. The only 2 sacks we got on the day were both Brandon Greer coming on the blitz. The second one, I have no idea how McKinney held on to that ball. I thought for sure he had a sack fumble, but he still got 2 sacks and 13 tackles. He was all over the place. He really played great. Jeremy Kimbrough, of course, he's somebody whose name we call pretty much every week, but he led the team with 14 tackles, also had a tackle for loss himself. He was tasked with the, unfortunate job of trying to tackle Dan Moore a couple times unsuccessfully, but otherwise he was real strong. He always seems to be in the right place and be around the ball. And then Demetrius McCray, our other All-American out there at cornerback that, seems to be, he's the only veteran corner we have with any kind of significant starting experience. And, he really came through. He only had 3 tackles, although a lot of that is because they really didn't throw his way that much. And he showed you why with the 2 interceptions. He had the one in the first half and one that sealed the game in the second. So he really came to play. He looked great out there. And one other person that really, that really impressed me was Deuce Robinson. For a guy that is only playing his second game as a stand-up linebacker, someone that was recruited as a down lineman, and still very much in that transitional phase into a new position. He really played well. His stats weren't quite as big as Greer and Kimbrough, but he still ended up with 8 tackles, had a tackle for loss. And he just always seemed to be getting off his blocks and either forcing McKinney out of the pocket or he's just another guy that really seemed to be in the right place. You can see that he's really progressing in that new role. And then another thing that was positive was from a coaching standpoint, the defensive adjustments in the second half. They really tightened up against the run. They got in they were in the backfield a lot more. They brought extra guys into the box, and after being just gashed in the first half, they gave up only 177 yards of offense in the second half, which in and of itself is not great. It's good, not great, but considering that 87 of those yards came on one play, that huge screen play and run to Dan Moore, the remainder, with the exception of that